Hello and welcome again. My name is Diptarup Ghosh Dassidar and I'm an assistant professor in the Amity School of Languages, Amity University, Chhattisgarh. And this is going to be the final class that we have on My Last Duchess. So what did we do in the earlier classes on My Last Duchess? So in the first lecture we had a discussion on Browning, on the poet, and then in the second session we had a discussion on the background to the poem My Last Duchess, its verse structure and the form in which it has been written, the dramatic monologue. After that, we have discussed in the very last video about the first part of the poem. We discussed how this entire poem is divided into four parts in general. So there is no distinct division. We are just doing this division to make things easy. So of the four parts, we have discussed the first part, which was introducing the poem, the introduction to the painting, what the Duke thinks about the painting, what the Duke thinks about the smile in the painting, how the Duke considers other people, how the Duke considered the Duchess, the painter, Fra Pandolf, and the character of the Duke is a little bit clearer according to the first stanza, that is, the first part, that is. Now we are going to discuss in this video the last three sections, the last three parts of the poem, which constitute the other half. And the second part of the poem is about the Duchess. So the character of the Duchess. What was it in the Duchess that the Duke disliked, or that caused in the Duchess becoming the last Duchess? Now you see a little bit of note on the title over here. So My Last Duchess would clearly mean that the Duchess is not present Duchess anymore. So she is the last Duchess, the last one, the last girl whom he married, and we have discussed who this girl is in the earlier video. Historically, that is. So this last Duchess is important here, and why it is important will be very clear in the last section, part 4 of the poem. So part 2 of the poem, it begins with a description of what kind of a disposition or character did the Duchess have. So she had a heart. She had a heart, how shall I say? So he talks about her heart, so her nature. How shall I say? Too soon made glad. It was made glad extremely soon. Anyone could make her happy. Too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on. So everything that she looked at, she liked it. And her looks went everywhere. She liked everything that she looked at, and her looks went everywhere, is a long way of saying that she liked everything. Okay? Sir, it was all one. He is actually calling the guest, and he says that, sir, it was all one. Sir, everything was same to her. What are the things that were same to her? My favor at her breast. So the number of things which are same to her, which bring that happiness in her face, that happiness in her heart. Number one is my favor at her breast. So it could mean two things. See, it could mean a necklace. It could mean a necklace that he gave her. So the Duke, whenever rich people get married, they give a certain ornament that goes down in the family. We'll come to this family part a little bit later. But let's say the Duke gifted a necklace. So a favor. A necklace is a favor at her breast. So something that she wears at her breast. So maybe a necklace, or it could also be, love showered upon her. Now this love could be physical love in itself. So these are the two ways in which this particular part can be understood. My favor at her breast. So either a necklace or some kind of an ornament that he gave, or my favor at her breast, the physical love that he had for her, which sounds a little bit like not so obvious in this case. However, this is number one. the dropping of the daylight in the west. Now this is the same, she gets equal satisfaction or equal happiness from this as she gets by seeing the sunset. So the sunset also brings equal happiness. What else? The bow of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her. So cherries gifted by a haughty lad. So you see, maybe some haughty, some self-righteous lad, officious fool. So a fool is a person who is really like not so high standard. So a very low standard but haughty person comes up with a few cherries because every time he goes past the Duchess gives him a smile, and he thinks that the Duchess is actually trying to flirt with him, and so every day he goes, he brings a cherry for the Duchess or maybe some flowers for the Duchess. And when the Duchess gets these cherries or these flowers, what does she do? She gives him the same smile that she gives the Duke. Now see, these are reasons for a possessive person like the Duke to get angry. We can understand the Duke. So the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bow of cherries that some officious fool broke in the orchard for her. So the officious fool didn't just come in the usual way but broke in, because he's not allowed to come in, right? The orchard, that is the garden of the Duke. So he's not allowed to come in the garden of the Duke, so he broke into the garden and he gifted it, and she was happy. I mean, the Duke would definitely get angry, come on. And the white mule she rode with around the terrace. So there was also a white mule. So a mule is an animal, you see. It's a domestic kind of a donkey, which is mostly ridden by domestic people, mostly ladies of the time, of any time in the past, for the aristocracy especially. So she used to ride a white mule, and whenever she used to ride that white mule, it gave her happiness. And what happened when she was happy? She gave that smile, that same smile that she gave to the Duke, that same smile she gave to the sunset, that same smile that she gave to that officious fool when he brought her flowers. Won't the Duke get angry? This is the character of the Duchess. She seems a little bit childish, doesn't she? But the fact is that, yes, she is a child, because historically he married a girl who is 14 years of age. What do you expect of a girl who is 14 years of age? And she died at the age of 17. Oops. So now you know that she will die. But we do not know what exactly happens. So let's read a little bit more. But now you know that she is a child, and the Duke should be correcting the child, right? But instead he doesn't. So he says that all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech. So everything, all of these things, these four things would draw from her, would bring out from her the same approving speech. So she would approve all of them equally, and that's a problem. Or blush at least. I mean, even if she did not appreciate them directly, she would blush, and that's even more dangerous, because when you say something gets spoken, then it has a meaning, right? It can be taken. But when you blush, anyone can take any meaning out of it, just like the fool maybe thinking that she's flirting. So all right, she thanked men. And see, he says that she thanked men. She thanked all the people. Good. That's a good thing, right? She thanked men, good. But thanked somehow, I know not how. The way in which she thanked, he does not understand, because as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name. Here's where the family issue comes in, right? So we talked about the different kinds of families. For instance, Duke of Ferrara, Alfonso's family is an old rich family, whereas Lucrezia's family is a nouveau riche family. So it's a newly made rich family. But unlike Alfonso, who has been rich for more than 900 years, whose family has been rich for more than 900 years. And now that the Medici girl has become a duchess, she should treat her name a little better, right? She should treat her name in a way that it is a 900-year-old name. It has got so much respect. But She does not. She ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Anyone gave her a gift, it would be the same to her. Who would stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Now, this is the question. After talking about the problems that the Duchess has, you would think that she's a child, maybe you should go and correct her. But what does the Duke think? The Duke thinks, who would go? Who would stoop? So just correcting her means stooping down. So who would stoop down? And he's a Duke, you see. So, and for a Duke and his wife, explaining anything to the wife would be like going down to her level. Didn't her father or didn't her parents or didn't her teachers teach her the manners and everything of royalty? So I have to teach her. That's not a right thing. Who would stoop? I won't stoop. So this is where the second part, that is the discussion about the Duchess, ends, and the third part begins, where he emphasizes on the fact that he will not bow down. How? He should not be bowing down to correct the Duchess, and that does not sit well with his character. So he says that who would stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Who would stoop to blame her for this sort of trifling? Trifling means light matter, not a heavy matter, a very light matter. So these are light, trivial things. Why should I bow down and correct her for little things? I should let her understand herself, right? And he says, which I have not. Like, no, I'm sorry. Even had you skill in speech, sir. So he's again pointing out to the guest, and he says that even if you had the speech of skill, which I have not. So he says that the Duke says that I do not have the skill of speech. And isn't it ironic? Because when we read this poem, which is actually a speech spoken by him, we realize that he is actually a good speaker. He can speak with reason. His speech has got a reasoning. It has got a good organization and a decorum. But here he says that even if you had skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one. So maybe the such an one is pronounced as such an on. So to make your will quite clear. So even if your speech was good enough so that you can clarify yourself or make your thoughts known to such a person like my little childish Duchess, well, and say, what would you say? Just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss or there exceed the mark. So what are the kind of things that he would have said if he had the skill in speech? He gives an example very clearly that these are the things that disgust me in you. See, this is something which you are lacking. This is something which you have, which you should have. And here are the things which you did more than you should have done. So when I gave you the gift, you were lacking in appreciation. You should have appreciated more. When he gave you the gift, you should not have appreciated him that much. Why did you appreciate him that much? You should have done less. So you see, you are exceeding the mark at some points and you are lacking at some points. So should I tell her all this? Well, as readers, we can say, yes, Duke, you should. You should have told her. I mean, you are the husband after all. But this Duke is a self-righteous, egocentric I figure. And he says, I cannot bow down. No, 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 no. And what is the point behind that? He says that, and if she let herself be lessoned so, even if she let herself be lessoned, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse. So even if she listened to you, or maybe she tried to understand you, right? Not plainly set her wits to yours, so tried to connect her wit to his wit, even if she tried to do that, forsooth, and forsooth means just for the sake of argument here, right? And made excuse, and let's say she made an excuse about why this happened or that happened. Even if I listened to those excuses, or even if I gave her the chance to come up to my level by speaking about it, that would be stooping. So he says, even that would be some stooping. And I choose never to stoop. This is the problem, you see. says that I choose never to stoop. So if she came up to me and if I see that she's understanding this is something I don't like and she corrects herself, good. But if I go to correct her, then I am stooping and I don't want to stoop. Patriarchy alert. So you see, this is where the patriarchy comes in as well. That I, as man of the family, as a man of the household, as a man of the entire county over here, you cannot make me come down to your level. You come up to my level yourself. Don't take my help. So that's the kind of reasoning that the Duke has. Says, "Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her. But who passed without much the same smile?" Says that, yeah, when I went to her, she smiled. I did not. Now, maybe, just before this statement, let's imagine that the Count probably asked him, or maybe he saw in the guest's eyes a question like, "But did not she smile when she looked at you?" And he answers that question. So we don't ever get to listen to the questions that the guest is asking. It's as if the questions are asked in the air, or the Duke can just see the questions in the eyes. Imagine someone looking at you in the eyes and just understanding every question that you have and just answering them one after another. You would be like, is this a god? Is this a god person? And he says that, "Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt." Okay, yeah, fine, she smiled. But I was not the only one. She smiled at everyone, right? Because whenever I passed her, she smiled. But who passed without much the same smile? Everyone got the same smile. What is the difference? I am the husband. Show me some difference, right? This grew. So you see, this grew. This is called an understatement. This entire line after this is what we call an understatement. So what he says in the next line after this grew, from this grew, that is an understatement. It's not saying the entire story, saying just a little bit of it, but you can imagine what happens. So this grew. What grew? Did her smiling grew? I mean, how can you just, like, one day you're smiling, the good smile, and the next day maybe your cheeks are wider, the next day it's even more wide. And how can you do that? How can you smile grow? Or maybe she smiled at more people. Well, she smiled at everyone. So what grew? Maybe this nature, he was somehow trying to change it, but it was not changing. And this attitude that she had, because he could not change, this grew. Maybe some kind of an affair grew with someone. We do not know anything. It's an understatement, and that's the point of an understatement. You do not know what exactly happened. This grew. I gave commands. What commands? I mean, what? What is the point? What commands did you give? Did you command her to do something? Did you command someone else to do something? Or, like, was it a command for the people? Whom was the command for? What was the command? We do not know. It's an understatement. And the next part. Then all smiles stopped together. This is the massive understatement. This is the understatement of the millennium, I guess. Then all smiles stopped together. One of the most quoted understatements ever. All smiles stopped together. Whose smiles? Whose smiles stopped? What does this mean? Did she stop smiling? I mean, did you say something to her? Did your command involve something that she just stopped smiling? Or does it mean something more sinister? Does it mean that she could not smile anymore? So did you give commands to, rip off her some part of her body? What did you do? Or did you just have her killed? Or did you kill her? Because you see, we do not know whether he killed her. He just gave commands, and giving commands is the job of a duke. The duke would do that. What commands? So this understatement is an amazing way of creating a threat. It is an amazing way of creating a suspense and yet giving the message. So it's like someone saying, "Dekh lena, yaad rakhenge." क्या याद रखेंगे, what is going to come after this. So as Indians, we often like every culture has its own way of understatements, right? And the moment he says that this grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together, it implies that he had her killed, and that is why she is the last Duchess. So you see, this poem is a retelling. This poem is a retelling of the actual history, which, according to the history, it is said that she was either poisoned, which would support this poem, or that she died of tuberculosis, which really doesn't make sense. But Browning doesn't want that. Browning is telling a story. He is creating drama through his poem. And how can you have drama without suspense, without some kind of dramatic event happening? So this shows the nature of the Duke. He can do anything. He can do anything to keep his image, his name intact. The name of the Duke matters more than anything else. The person doesn't matter. The image matters more. And he says, then all smiles stop together. There she stands as if alive. So you see, now he points to he has told the entire story, and then he points to the painting and says, there she stands as if alive. And this is where the third part ends. So the second part was the description of the Duchess and what are the problems with the Duchess. The third part, he would not stoop, and therefore what did he do? He had the Duchess killed. And now the last part, why is he telling this story? Why? What is the point of this entire poem? Comes to that. Says that, will it please you rise? Now he looks at the guest and he says that, will it please you rise? I mean, you have been sitting for some time, let's rise. Again, this is an order in the form of a request. So will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below. So there are some people who are down below. They have come up. He is showing the guest around in his house for some reason. We don't know what reason. Let's meet the company below. There is a company below. We'll go and meet them. Then I repeat, the count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed. Now we get to understand why this guest has come here. So this guest, the Nicolas Madruz of history, is actually the messenger of the Count of Tyrol, who is the guardian of Barbara, the eighth daughter of the great Roman Emperor Ferdinand I, and Ferdinand II is the Count of Tyrol. We have that discussed in the earlier video. So this Count of Tyrol is the master of the messenger, Nicolas Madruz, as we know him. And the messenger has come to the Duke to talk about the wedding, the second wedding of the Duke. So now that the Duke is going to remarry, he thinks it should be known. The history of the last Duchess should be known so that the same mistake is not repeated. Go tell your master, this is how I am. Go tell your master that if Barbara makes the same mistakes, she will have the same consequence. She will have the same fate as my last Duchess. And as if, what is even more important here than the lady, because at that time, even now, often, marriages between aristocrats were not for love. Marriages as love, I mean, the relationship between marriage and love has come much later. Marriages were initially made for property. So all he wants is the property, right? And he says that the dowry should be all right because your count is such a good, there's a munificence. So he is a well-known person. He is a rich person. I am sure that whatever dowry I will want, your master will not deny me. Because if he denies me, then no. What I did with my last Duchess, know what I can do. So anyways, I hope that the dowry will be allowed. Though his fair daughter self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Now, maybe here is a little bit of tampering with the history, because in the history, the count is not the father of the new bride to be, the new duchess. The count is actually the brother of the duchess, and the father is someone else completely. But here, just to simplify the narrative, the count has been shown as the father, because see, Browning doesn't need to give a historical lesson to people. He just needs to give you a story, and that's what he's giving you. He's giving you a good drama. Enjoy the drama, go home. That's it. So, though his fair daughter self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Now see, this is called hypocrisy. This is what we in today's day call hypocrisy, where he says that, see, actually what is more important to me is the daughter. What is more important to me is my duchess. Dowry is okay, it is just sideways, but actually it is the dowry that is more important, you see. And that is again understatement. It is just hidden somewhere. So we are almost towards the end now. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Now they decide to go down, and the entire the idea why this story was necessary is clear now. And then while going down, they have just crossed a stair, and they can see a huge sculpture of some sort. And the Duke, he points towards the sculpture. One last thing to show. So he has talked about. So it's a tour going on, right? He's showing everything to the messenger, because the messenger is going to go back and report everything that he has seen to the count. So he goes down, and there's another piece of art, just like the painting of the Duchess. There is another piece of art. So now we know that the count is the Duke of Ferrara is a connoisseur of art. So he is someone who enjoys and who takes pleasure in having art. So art is more important than life to this person. There is an amazing story by Edgar Allan Poe, and the name of that story is The Oval Portrait, if I'm not wrong. So The Oval Portrait is one such story by Edgar Allan Poe, The Oval Portrait, which talks about this distinction between art and life, and what is more important. Is art more important, or is life more important? So looks at this final piece of art and says that, notice Neptune though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. So I'll just remove this, and I'll tell you a little bit about this painting, this sculpture. So Claus of Innsbruck. Who is the Claus of Innsbruck? Here the Claus of Innsbruck is a fictional character, because there is no Claus of Innsbruck. Or is there one? There is. We'll talk about that. But the Claus of Innsbruck in real life, Nikolaus Madruz, as we have discussed, is not a painter. So when he says Claus of Innsbruck, he is actually meaning Nikolaus Madruz of Innsbruck, who is not a painter. Nicholas Madruz is actually the messenger. So why does he say Claus of Innsbruck? Because Browning, you see, he has given a hint to you in the very beginning of the poem by saying Ferrara, to denote that this is the story from which I have taken. And towards the end of the poem, he gives another hint that this is actually the story by taking the name of Nikolaus Madruz. So he doesn't take the name of any big other king or the count himself, but he takes the name of someone who is less known. So whoever is a scholar would understand that this poem is based on this story. So the name Nikolaus Madruz, the only reason he has said Claus of Innsbruck is because he wants scholars to figure out that Claus of Innsbruck is actually Nikolaus Madruz of Innsbruck, and therefore you would understand the context of the story. So that is how Browning is different from his wife, Elizabeth Barrett. And Elizabeth Barrett did not have such, detailed elements in her poems. Robert Browning had. The reason why Elizabeth Barrett Browning was much more popular at the time than Browning himself. Browning became popular among critics even more than Elizabeth Barrett. So anyways, the image that he shows in the end is that of Neptune taming a seahorse. So who is Neptune? Neptune is the Roman sea god. The Greek counterpart of this is Poseidon. We know this. So Poseidon in Greek, Neptune in Roman mythology. So Neptune, who is an all-powerful god, is taming a seahorse. So seahorse is a rather timid creature. So a seahorse is not a shark. A seahorse is not a leviathan, not a whale. A seahorse is a very small creature, and there is nothing really big about controlling a seahorse. But the Neptune, the god, is actually trying to control a timid creature in itself, a seahorse. And this, in a way, tells us a lot about the Duke himself. The Duke is like Neptune, who will control this timid creature no matter what. And if he cannot control, he'll just make sure that the creature doesn't exist. Right? So, the character of the Duke gets a closure in this last reference that we have here. So, the painter, Fra Pandolf, and the sculptor, Claus of Innsbruck, they are all fictional. But Claus of Innsbruck has roots in history, and the reason he has mentioned it is because he wants people to figure out the relationship. So that is overall the poem My Last Duchess, people. We are done with this poem, and I hope that I have been able to explain it to you about the what the Duke is thinking, and how the Duke looks at the world and the people, and what the poem means in itself. If you have any issues, any questions, any thoughts, then I encourage you to express them down in the comment section below, and I would be happy to answer all queries. Thank you so much. See you again in the next video.